Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you a little more about what we're doing here at UrtheCast. And that is essentially building, launching, and operating the world's first HD video platform of Earth from space with 2 cameras mounted on the outside of the International Space Station. And basically what that means is that we have an agreement with the Russian Space Agency. And the general framework of the agreement is that we'll give them 2 cameras. They provide the launch to the International Space Station, the installation on the outside, the downlink, the power, the maintenance, and then basically we split the data. They take the data of Russia, and they'll give it to the Ministry of Forestry and Farming and Mapping and Urban Planning and Coast Guard, kind of Border Patrol kind of stuff, and then we'll take the data of the rest of the world. If we add up the value of what they're giving us through the launch and the installation and kind of what they're putting into the barter system, it's about $100 million. Space is incredibly expensive. They charge their astronauts out at about $100,000 per hour. So it's just ridiculously expensive. If we add up the value of if we add up the value of the data that we're giving them of Russia, it's about $150 million. So from a math standpoint, it does actually add up pretty nicely. We'll do 4 things with the imagery and the data that we have. First is we'll sell it into the Earth observation industry, which is people who want pictures of Earth from space. Secondly, we'll take it and we'll give it into the media. Third is we're making a web platform, kind of a Google Earth type experience. And fourth is we're going to take the API from that web platform, open it up, and allow other developers to make games, apps, educational tools built around that. And I'm going to come back to all 4 of those in a few minutes. But before we go too much further, I should probably give a little bit of background on UrtheCast and kind of how we got started, because it does kind of frame the conversation. So about 5 years ago, my brother used to work for McDonnell Detweiler in Richmond, which is Canada's premier aerospace firm, built satellites and so forth. And he headed up international business development. And the Russian Space Agency had been asking MDA for a couple years prior to that for a radar camera. Canada's one of the world leaders in radar. MDA is one of the world leaders in building these radar cameras. And so the Russian Space Agency, which is called Roscosmos, wanted MDA to give them one of these radar cameras that they could install on the outside of the space station. And it wasn't going to work. There's all kinds of reasons why it wasn't going to happen. Radar cameras are expensive. MDA would have had to basically make that investment. MDA doesn't really like to do that kind of stuff. The radar is kind of sensitive. You can see through clouds. You can see at night. You can kind of see into buildings to a certain extent. So the Canadian government might have actually blocked the export of that technology outside of the country because it's kind of dual use, kind of military kind of stuff. Anyway, so my brother Wade got sent to Russia. I'm along with a guy by the name of George Tice, who is a rocket scientist, to tell the Russian Space Agency that MDA was not going to give him a camera. They're in Moscow, they're having the conversation, and the Russians said, okay, fair enough, we get that. What else can you do? And they began to brainstorm. All space agencies are looking to justify their existence, and they want to show that they're doing good stuff, for the taxpayer and so forth. And so they're sitting in a boardroom in Moscow, and they began to toss out around just stuff that they could do. And around the same time, there was a guy in Hornby Island who had an eagle's nest up on his property, Hornby Island, just off the coast of Vancouver. And he had crawled up there and somehow installed a webcam on the eagle's nest and was streaming this stuff out over the web. And it was ridiculously entertaining. I mean, there was nothing happening, of course, but just the sense of anticipation, and it was being streamed all over the web, and schools and kids, and it was a screensaver for lots of people to see what these eagles were going to do, and these little eaglets if they hatched or whatever happened. So in a moment of inspiration, Wade tossed out, how about if we just throw up a couple of webcams, and we'll just stream this stuff out over the web. And the Russians loved it. They said, that's exactly what we're looking for. It's educational, it's environmental, it's social, it's consumer. If you can do that for us, we'll be all over it. So Wade and George came back. Wade drafted up kind of a business case. George did kind of a technical solution. They went for 3 or 4 rounds of meetings at MDA, and MDA is like, that's not us. It's too early stage, too startup, too internet, too. We don't build companies, we buy. MDA has a couple thousand employees there, and they said, that's not us. So MDA passed. And so at the time, my background was in tech and finance, And Wade came to me and said, MDA is about to pass on this. Do you think it's a good idea? And can you raise $500,000 from some buddies to kind of seed it? Go to Russia, meet the Russians, see if we can get some traction, and just kind of go from there. And so I said yes, and so we did. So we incorporated the company about 3 years ago, raised the first $500,000, spent the next 18 months kind of raising more money. Right now we have about 80 employees. 2 years ago we had 5. And as Randy mentioned, we went public last summer on the TSX, and last year we raised about $55 million in that. And a bunch of the early shareholders actually are from Alberta, a bunch of the guys who put in the initial $500,000 and $800,000 that we raised. So there's lots of early stage Alberta shareholders. Here's a picture of the medium resolution camera. It's about this big, it's about this long, and it's pointed directly down, and it takes a 50-kilometer wide swath of whatever it sees at what's called 5-meter resolution. So anything that's 5 meters big, you can see. So buildings, roads, rooftops, fields, farms, things like that. They use it for kind of wide area coverage. From a camera in space standpoint, it's kind of standard. You know, there's lots of other cameras up there like this. This next camera is much more advanced. It's about this big. It's about this long, and it's mounted on a pointable platform that we can swivel and hover and hold and direct. So if you imagine the space station, let's say it's over the airport, it's traveling about 25,000 kilometers an hour. The one camera is pointed directly down. It's taken a 50-kilometer wide image swath. We decide there's something happening over downtown Edmonton that we like. We point the camera over downtown Edmonton and hold it there for about 90 seconds as the space station flies past, and we'll take a 90-second video at what's called 1-meter resolution. Anything that's 1 meter big, you can see. So cars, buses, boats, planes, groups of people. You'll never see the guy mowing the lawn in the backyard, but you can see a golf cart, and that's basically what it is. And so where we are right now is the cameras. Actually, here's a little video that shows kind of how these things work. Space station goes around Earth 16 times a day. It's the most expensive man-made project ever. They've spent $100 billion building it. Russia spends about $10 million a day maintaining their part of the space station. It's incredibly expensive. And so you can see the little video. The one camera's fixed. The other camera we can point and hover. This is over Vancouver. It's kind of can't really see stuff, but you can see boats and cars and things like that, large groups of people. And then as it pans past Vancouver, then we go on to the next target, which might be Seattle, San Francisco, and we'll take about 150 of those 90-second videos every day. We send down 200 gigabytes every day. So the cameras record, record, record. They see an antenna. They drop the data down. They record, record, drop the data down, drop the data down. We take it, store it, process it, and then stream it out over the web and sell it to people who want pictures of Earth from space. Here's just a quick snapshot showing some of the testing that we did with the Russian Space Agency. They have a full-scale replica of the space station underwater, just outside Moscow. So they take mock-ups of the cameras down, and they practice installing them and so forth. The pointable platform that our cameras were actually mounted to was installed. So this is a picture of a guy out in outer space installing kind of this pointable platform. And then last November, the cameras were launched to space on this rocket right here. I thought it blew up. I thought it exploded. I thought I'm staying in Kazakhstan. I'm not coming back. That's it. I'm going native. But yeah, there it is. Actually, these rockets are all left over from the Soviet era, and these are all converted ICBMs, intercontinental missiles that the Soviet Union's had. And so this rocket's called a Soyuz, and there's another one which is called the Dnieper, and it's launched from underground. And there's a story about 6 or 7 years ago. My brother Wade was in the Ukraine, which is where these Dnieper rockets were built, and he was taking a tour of the factory. And the guy who was there goes, "This factory here was responsible. This factory here was responsible for the fall of the Soviet Union." Kind of pounding on the table, making a statement like that. So Wade goes, "That's an interesting statement. What's the story?" And so it turned out that this Dnieper rocket was built kind of in the late 70s into the early 80s, and it was the most dangerous ICBM ever built, and it was called the SS-18, and the U.S. was terrified of it. It was the most expensive, the most dangerous. They could put multiple payloads on it, multiple warheads. Most of the U.S. rockets could hold kind of 3 or 4 warheads, and this one could hold kind of 4 or 5 times that. So it was 400 or 500 times more dangerous than the U.S. rockets at the time. And so the U.S. called it Satan. The Russians called it SS-18, and the U.S. called it Satan. And so as a result of that rocket, which could be launched from Moscow right over towards the eastern seaboard, it could take out half of the eastern seaboard kind of in one shot. Reagan built the Star Wars program and began to initiate that. And then just began to pump money into defense and into, just kind of spend. And so, so the Soviet Union tried to keep up. They kept spending money. They couldn't keep up, and the economy began to tank. And eventually, in 1991, of course, the Soviet Union fell apart. So, the guy made that statement. And there might have been an element of truth to that, which is because of that rocket called Satan. First time I flew to Russia, I was in the spring of 2011. We had just incorporated the company. We had just raised the first $500,000. We didn't know what we were doing, of course. We didn't know how this was going to play out. And one of our co-founders is a guy by the name of Sergey. And he used to work for the Russian Space Agency. He called up and said, Scott, you need to come out. You need to meet the Russians. They want to do some due diligence on you guys and kind of, what you're going to do. And I was the only employee, of course, at UrtheCast. We just incorporated. We didn't know how it was going to play out. So I said, fine, I'll come over. I said, how many people am I going to be meeting with? He goes, maybe 4 or 5 guys. I said, okay, and how long am I going to be meeting with? He goes, just a couple of hours, 3 or 4 hours, kind of 4 or 5 slides, PowerPoint presentation, talk about what you're going to do in big picture kind of stuff, no more, not too much detail, just kind of big overview. So I said, fine. So, Vancouver to London, London to Moscow, it's like an 18-hour trip. Land at the hotel. Sergey meets me at the hotel, and so we're getting set. And I said, okay, are we all set for the next one? He goes, yeah, everything's set up. I said, how many guys? He goes, not less than 10. I said, okay, how long? He goes, well, they've booked off all day, 9 to 5. And I said, I've got maybe 5 slides. It's like 45 minutes at the most. He goes, oh, no problem. So the next morning, sure enough, we go over to the Russian Space Agency, and I walk into the room, and there's about 25 people there. And it's all very formal. And, there's Sergey, myself, and then this other guy from MDA who was a Canadian with me. And just incredibly formal, English translation, Russian translation, English translation, and so forth. So actually 45 minutes does spread out to about 45 hours pretty easily. So so as we're getting going, there's this elderly gentleman who walks in, kind of shuffles in. He looked to be in his early 80s. And he gives me his card, and his name is Viktor Legostayev. And his card says, Hero of the Soviet Union. So I felt a little twinge of actual jealousy as I read that card, to be honest. I thought, I wonder, it turns out that he designed the electronic controls for Yuri Gagarin's first flight into space. So he truly was a hero of the Soviet Union. So anyways, we go for lunch, and after lunch, he stands up to make a toast. Kind of shuffles it up, and it's through a translator, and his toast goes something like this. He goes, there's a Canadian, a Russian, an American, and a Frenchman who escaped from prison up in northern Russia, up in northern Siberia. And so it's not exactly politically correct, but you kind of get that. He goes, so they're running through the forest, they're trying to escape from the gulag through the snow, and then out of nowhere, a bear comes out and begins to chase them. Catches up to the guy from France, kills him. So now it's just the American, the Russian, and the Canadian. They're running through the forest. Sure enough, the bear catches up to him again, jumps on the American, he kills the American. So now just a Canadian. I suspect he kind of changes the nationalities for whoever's in the room. Anyways, he goes, so there's a Canadian, an American. They're running through the forest, and sure enough, the same bear catches up to him. He's just about to jump onto the Canadian when the Russian pulls out a gun and shoots the bear, kills the bear. So the Canadian guy goes, hang on a second. If you had the gun, why wouldn't you have killed it, at the first time? And the Russian reaches into his jacket, pulls out a bottle of vodka. He goes, well, I've only got enough vodka for 2, and I don't like to drink alone. And so that's his toast. So then he gives his toast. So it's not bad, right? So a couple minutes later, it's my turn. And so I didn't have anything prepared. I didn't have a story. I didn't have an anecdote. I didn't have any, there's no little thing. So I fumbled something about, to health and the project, and just kind of stumbled my way through it. And I remember this this elderly gentleman looking at me with kind of disappointed eyes, thinking, I made that joke and you fumbled on it. And so it's kind of like a disappointed dad, but it stuck with me. So Cameras, of course, and the cameras were installed just at the end of January, and we're going to spend the next 3 months kind of commissioning the cameras, calibrating, focusing the cameras, and we'll be looked to be streaming imagery out over the web and basically selling it into the Earth observation industry by the early summer, kind of May or June. That's kind of a time frame. Moving forward, we think we have the ability to turn the Earth observation industry upside down. Pricing models are changing. Video is unique. No one else has video of Earth from space. Timelines in terms of when a picture is taken and when you can actually deliver it is being collapsed. And we think we have the ability to be at the forefront, basically, of the distribution of real-time data over the web, kind of open democratization. The industry itself has been around for about the last 20 years. It's about $1.5 billion per year. That's serviced by about 10 satellites. Historically, it's been all governments. The Ministry of Forestry and Farming and Agriculture and so forth. That's what they use pictures of Earth from space for. But there's a growing commercial sector. So right now, you can go onto Bloomberg's, and you can order a service that'll count the cars in Walmart's parking lot. And they'll take pictures of Walmart's parking lot, and they'll predict same-store sales based on how many cars are in the parking lot. Every car is worth $87.50, so they count the cars up, they times it by that, and they can predict same-store sales based on that. They'll take pictures of Facebook's parking lot, and if there's been 50 cars in there every Sunday for the last 6 weeks, and last Sunday there's 300, it means something to someone. Who knows what it means, but it means something's happening at Facebook. They'll take pictures of the coffee farms down in South America. And if it looks like it's going to be a good year for coffee, the price of coffee is probably going to go down. If it looks like it's going to be a bad year for the coffee farms, the price of coffee is going to go back up. They'll take pictures of the oil tanks. The oil tanks have these lids that float, and they'll take pictures at an angle. And if the lid is so far down from the top, it means that the reserves are low, and so the price of oil is probably going to go up. We're getting calls from mining companies all over the world. Can you give me a picture every 2 months of my mining operation to see who's putting in roads and kind of scratching the surface and kind of sniffing around me? Oil and gas pipeline monitoring. We're getting calls from people who say Africa as well as Eastern Europe. People will back up a tanker to a pipeline, stick in a screwdriver, fill up the tanker, and then leave. And then some guy wanders by a month later, of course, and there's oil all over, and they got to clean it up and all the rest of it. Oil and gas companies want to see who's putting up rigs around them and things like that. So, that sounds like pretty good news. Can we get an update there on the score? All right. Thank you. Maybe we should confirm that that's actually good news before we start. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It's someone from Seattle. No, go ahead. Is there a... Oh, no, sorry. Okay, I was waiting for an update there. So where we think we're really going to be able to shine is in some of the forward technologies. 3D mapping, elevation kind of stuff, being able to incorporate some of those technologies, take 3D images of cities so you can do fly-throughs, things like that, and then open that up to companies who are doing humanitarian efforts, lots of environmental stuff. That's where we think we have the ability to basically be at the forefront. And from an industry changing standpoint, we're working within the industry and at the same time as disrupting it. Satellites in space are incredibly expensive. Some of our competitors spend $500 million building a satellite, and they charge $20,000 for a picture of Earth from space. And so one of the last satellites launched cost $800 million. And so when you spend $800 million building something, you have to charge $20,000 because you're trying to make some of your money back, and at the same time you're trying to pay off the next satellite. So we have the ability to go in that. Our cameras cost $17 million, and essentially turn that industry upside down. So we can sell a picture for $20,000. We can sell a picture for $1,000. We can stream it out over the web and allow some guy to buy it off his phone, for $1 and still make money on it. And so we think there's lots of opportunities to turn that industry upside down. We have a team of about 8 people down in San Francisco who are building out the web platform. And the idea behind the web platform, it's a little bit of a Google Earth type thing. You can log in, enter your address, and see a picture of your house taken 2 weeks, 10 weeks, 18 weeks, kind of scroll back and forth in time, see what things have changed. and then at the same time enter your address and find out when it's going to be above you next. Because we know where the space station is, it'll be above you in 5 hours and 57, 56, 55 minutes. You can organize your event around when you'll be imaged from space. So your wedding, your corporate event, you can get your buddies together in white shirts on a green field, spelling out, "I love you," "Will you marry me?" That kind of stuff. Go back inside. A couple hours later, it's streaming over the web. You can download, edit it, remix it, share it. We think people are going to do all kinds of jackass kind of stuff when they know they're going to be imaged from space, and of course they will. And then on top of that, we overlay other content. So we overlay Facebook, social layers, tweets, check-ins, Yelps, things like that. We crowdsource content. So you take out your phone, you take a 360-degree view of this room, you tag it, the Delta Hotel, Edmonton, whatever it is, you upload that to the platform. The next time someone types in Edmonton, they get a view from the medium resolution still camera, they get some videos, they get some local content, they get some crowdsourced stuff. And the idea is to end up with an online kind of geolocation-based history of stuff forever. And the idea is with Facebook, you follow buddies from university. With Twitter, you follow people who you think are influential. And with UrtheCast, you end up following a location. And the location's there forever. And then we take that API and open it up and allow other developers to make games, apps, educational tools, all built around an open source API. And what those apps are going to look like, we don't know. But space is for science. I mean, space is designed for education, research and development, science. They've spent $100 billion building out the International Space Station. It's the most expensive thing ever. I think the next most expensive is the channel, and there's people living up there, of course, for 5 or 6 months at a time. But you have that, and then you have the next thing, and then you have people on the moon, and then you have people on Mars, and people want to mine asteroids, and now they're trying to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And it all starts with these small, simple, not inexpensive, but the first steps. And so, what those apps are going to look like: games, science, research, education. We don't know. We've signed agreements with lots of nonprofits who want to use it to monitor old-growth forests in Indonesia. We signed an agreement with the United Nations. They reached out to us and they said, "Hey, can we use it to track animal migration, social stuff, disasters, humanitarian water management, things like that. You can tell where rivers are going and so forth." So I firmly believe that in a relatively short period of time of the cameras being turned on, a couple things will happen. One is we'll capture some imagery that no one's ever seen before, and we'll put that out there. And if we had captured some of the global events that we think back over the last few years, everyone in the world is going to want to come to the website once. Fukushima, as an example, you can't fly over there because it was a nuclear zone, but you can get pictures from space. And if you think back to some of the media stuff, it was all pictures from Google Earth that were all kind of 4 or 5 years old. If we're taking pictures every couple weeks, every couple days, everyone in the world is going to want to come to that once. The other thing that we're going to be doing sometime later this summer is installing what's called a limb camera on the inside of the International Space Station, kind of pointing out over the horizon. And it's going to look something like this. This is just taken from still cameras. They just kind of snap together, but this will be streaming out over the web. So this is what Earth looks like, zoomed out, low resolution, zoomed out, but this is what Earth looks like from space. This is Baja California. That's kind of Mexico City on the left-hand side. Lightning flashes, clouds. This is the Pacific Ocean. You've got South America there. That green curve is basically the atmosphere. On the left-hand side, you've got the Amazon with some lights, and then the sun rises and sets 16 times a day, and it kind of looks like this. This is southern Florida, into the Florida Keys, the Bahamas, Central Europe. This is Southern Europe. There's Italy. And, Italy does, in fact, look like a boot. You can see it there on the left-hand side. Turkey, Cyprus, Greece. There's the Nile on the right-hand side, the Nile River there in northern Africa. And this is the Northern Lights. This is what they look like from above. They kind of look cool. So you can imagine that just kind of streaming in your, over your screensaver, a TV channel, kind of like the fireplace channel, something like that. We stopped it right there. Actually, if you look in the top right-hand corner there, that's the Canadarm. So a little bit of propaganda there. which was built by McDonald Detweiler up on the right-hand side there. So when you talk to astronauts, and I've talked to 5 of them, they all say that going to space changes them. They get up there, they realize how small Earth is, how fragile, how all connected, there's no borders, there's no countries. The guys or the people who have been up twice, they see how the Earth has changed actually in between those 2 times. And they all come back with a greater sense of planet stewardship and how we're all kind of living on the planet together. And the goal at UrtheCast is take a little bit of what astronauts see and be able to put that out on the line. And so here's a quote from the first lunar voyage, which I think is kind of indicative. What was most significant about the lunar voyage was not that man set foot on the moon, of course, but that they saw Earth from space, and they could see how fragile it is, how we're all connected, how we're all living together. And I'd like to think there's an element of truth to that. And so just being able to, again, we think that, there's the first time you saw your house on Google Earth, you go, this is incredible. I didn't know what it looked like. The second or third time you went back and you said, it's kind of the same picture, because the pictures are all, it's all the same picture, it's all 5 years old. But it certainly sparked something in you, in most of us, about looking at stuff from above. And so everybody wants it more often. So, so the picture 5 years ago is cool. I want to see what it looked like last week. I want to see what it looked like over time. I want to see how things have changed, change detection. I think that's what people are looking for next. And when you talk to the guys at Google who actually came up with the first Google Earth, they were just kind of messing around. They were just kind of screwing around with it. They didn't know what it was going to look like. They bought some old imagery. They paid about $20 million for it, and they overlaid it on top of the Earth, and they put it out there, and they just weren't sure what was going to happen. And it went crazy. It's been downloaded 1 billion times. But I think people are looking for, just kind of for more current stuff. So, thank you.